Welcome to the Civic Hub. The Civic Hub is a shared community space for grassroots and small nonprofit organizations working to make lives better for everyone in Waterloo Region. Partner organizations come from a range of fields: environmental justice, democratic reform, arts and culture, anti-poverty, anti-racism, human rights, ethno-cultural and newcomer support, technology, peace and nonviolence, spirituality, and well-being. On the show, we welcome one of our partners to the Civic Hub. Today, we welcome to the Civic Hub Cathie Stewart of ALIVE / Poverty Professors. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome, and welcome to the Civic Hub, Cathie. Tell me, ALIVE is an acronym. What does it stand for?
ALIVE stands for Awareness of Low-Income Voices, and it was a group founded a number of years ago to bring together people with experience of living with low income, to help them to find resources for themselves and to support each other in advocacy for their lives and what they could do as part of the community.
Okay, so it's a mutual support group as well as providing some practical assistance to people with low incomes.
That's correct.
That's right. And Poverty Professors, what is that?
So Poverty Professors was an initiative that we started a little over a year ago now, and it was around educating people about what it's like to live with low income. And we started out with this very broad vision of bringing both education to people who don't live in poverty and helping people who live in poverty learn more about how to manage what they're doing and find resources for themselves. We found that it was much too broad for us to focus. It was too big for us, so we focused on the education piece, and so we've developed a slideshow and a presentation that we've been able to take out into the community, and particularly to universities and colleges, but also to some community groups.
Okay. ALIVE used to sponsor education sessions at the Civic Hub. Is this part of that?
It still is. It's taken a bit of a back burner, but we're moving ahead with that. Our next meeting, we're going to have somebody from Community Gardens to tell us how we can help with community gardens and also how we could possibly access some resources.
Would that be Doug Jones?
That would be.
Doug was on our podcast just a couple of weeks back.
That's right.
Yeah. How has it been received? Have you got good reaction to this?
We've had very good reaction, amazing reaction actually, and it's so affirming for those of us who are struggling to make ends meet, struggling to manage to have a sense of self-worth, to feel like we are really valued for what we know and what we are doing. It really is, it's been very affirming.
Yeah. The Civic Hub is largely promoting the lived experience of people in all all facilities of life. You know, whether it's low-income people or people, BIPOC, people of color, and this seems to mesh right in with what the Civic Hub is trying to offer.
It really does, and it's been wonderful for us to be able to connect with other people and realizing that so many of our marginalized groups end up living in poverty. So there are many overlaps, and so it's been really wonderful to make those connections.
Right. Have you been in the Civic Hub with other groups and found that synergy?
Yes, we many of us attend the monthly meetings. And then we get to hear what the other groups are doing, and some people from other groups have joined us, some of our people have joined the other groups,
right,
as the interest and the ability is there.
Yeah. How about spreading out to the wider audience? You said you're presenting some of these Poverty Professor, are they seminars?
They've taken a couple of different shapes. We've gone into some classrooms and presented with our slideshow. We did one that we did totally online. We have done some phone over the phone kind of
Okay.
things where
Web
we've talked to
conferences.
people, and and we're open for whatever people do. We've also had tables at a couple of events where we've had our information out, and so people can come and talk to us one-on-one.
This would be at places like Festival of Neighborhoods.
Yes, Festival of Neighborhoods was one. Labor Day picnic, we had a
Right.
table up there. There was a recent event at Victoria Park that some people were at.
Okay. And so when you've been out to the places where you've gone to visit, the universities, have you received feedback from those groups, and have any of them come back to you to become involved?
We haven't had anybody come back to be totally involved, although we do have quite a bit of involvement with the School of Social Work from the at Wilfrid Laurier from
Okay.
the onset of the program. So we do have support from them, financial as well as having
Oh.
people come over and talk with us and help us on our creating our presentation, giving us some advice.
Right, right. I first met somebody from ALIVE way back when at a poverty conference in Cambridge. And ALIVE wasn't a participant in that, although I think they should have been. Do you find that ALIVE goes out to the community to gather information rather than present it?
We have done both. Many of our members are parts of other groups that are involved. Many of them were part of the play Living Below the Line,
Oh,
and they've been part of other poverty activist
Okay.
groups.
that play, Living Below the Line, was that an initiative of ALIVE?
No, I'm not sure where the initiative came from, but the people organizing it came to ALIVE for some of our stories and then invited us to take part.
Okay, so you became very much involved in it. How did that go? I had heard about it, but
I didn't take part in it myself,
Oh.
but I heard it went really well.
okay.
The stories are certainly stories we've lived, well, and some of them are personal stories of people from our group, and there are learnings from that. I attended it, one of their performances, I think their third performance, and it was just fantastic. Well done, and very poignant for somebody who's experienced some of those things, not all of them,
Right.
obviously, but
Right. Is it something that ALIVE might get into, providing not direct educational experiences, but indirect ones like a play or a reading, maybe publishing some poetry?
I think that's something they would enjoy.
Yeah? But it's not something that's on your agenda right now.
Not in particular, but it certainly could be. The Poverty Professor program is funded until the end of June.
Oh.
So we're hoping to get as many presentations out as possible
Right.
by then. That we can probably continue it for a little while after that because we'll have the resources. But then I think our focus will move towards some of the other stuff. So
Right. Stuff that isn't directly funded by the Poverty Professors.
yeah, funding pot.
Yes, the funding pot. What are the funding pots for ALIVE?
We've had a Kindred grant, which was fantastic. It was our first grant for poverty professors, and then we got funding from Upstream,
Okay.
and so that's wonderful. And then we've had we've had ongoing funding from. Now, correct me if I've got this wrong. Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario has been our ongoing funding for many years, and they've helped us to be able to pay for our meetings and our activities.
And I'm sure you take donations directly to ALIVE as well.
We do through the Social Development Center,
Right.
and we've had a couple of donations directly to us coming out of our presentations.
Ah, okay.
So that's been very
not only providing education, but a little bit of revenue as well.
yes.
Okay, that's very handy. Yeah. How long have you been involved?
I have been involved for probably about 5-6 years.
Mm-hmm.
I started out, my husband and I were one of the founders of the Out of the Cold program in KW.
Right.
And from that, we were invited to join a couple of different groups around homelessness, housing, and poverty initiatives. And I became part of Poverty Free KW, and we did a lot of work on exploring both the implications of poverty, the cycles of poverty, and possible solutions to poverty. And when that work was finished, I was kind of looking for another place where I could connect and continue my work on poverty, because it's something very close to me. And I found the ALIVE group, and I was invited by Irma Friesen, who was heading it up at that time, to join the group, and met some wonderful people. And now the group is headed up by Louise Walchuk, and
Oh, I know Louise, yeah.
yeah, so, and she's doing a wonderful job. So.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Poverty KW. There's other anti-poverty organizations in Kitchener and Waterloo as well. Thinking here of Alliance Against Poverty that recently closed up its doors. Do you find that there isn't enough business to sustain multiple anti-poverty groups?
I think there's enough business. The problem, I think, lays in the fact that it's such hard work, and it seems it's very hard to maintain hope when things just seem to get worse and worse and worse. And we don't necessarily, although we hear good things that could happen, there's always this umbrella of dread that things are going to get worse.
Yeah, I suppose calling it the business of poverty is very poor phrasing on my part.
I have to say, my husband always said that if we could make homelessness and poverty into a money-making business, we'd end it pretty quick.
Yeah. So having all these people working towards anti-poverty, people who are generally of low income themselves, must be especially hard, because many people with low incomes have to hold down 2, maybe 3 jobs, occupying a lot of their time, and in the remaining time that they've got, they're busy doing activist work. That has to be tiring.
It is quite tiring, and a number of the people we have now are people with disabilities, or people like myself who should be retired, would be retired probably if I weren't living in poverty. But so yes, the finding the time, and particularly when you're dealing with people with disabilities, they have a limited ability to continue the strength and the stamina needed to do the work, as well as sometimes a lack of training. So one of the nice things about the poverty professors was the recognition that we carried a font of knowledge that other people might not have because they haven't experienced it.
Right. That's the intersectionality of poverty and many other people of marginal living conditions. You mentioned people with disabilities. You mentioned people who are of an age where they ought to be retired. Do you find that there is some cooperation between groups? There's an association of retired people in Waterloo. There's the Disability and Human Rights Program, also operating out of the Social Development Center.
Yes, and we do find there's a lot of connections there between the different groups. And I mean, somebody living with disability is facing housing issues, they're facing poverty issues, they're facing support issues. So their focus may be on something a little different right now, but it's all folded in. Same thing with people of color. They face the discrimination, people with from the 2S LGBTQ, the discrimination that is faced. And the discrimination, I find, is so ingrained in us, and we carry it ourselves without realizing it. So having something like the Civic Hub, where we come together, talk to each other, and learn from each other, helps to dispel that amongst ourselves as well.
Right. Acorn has recently become a big splash in the local community. They're housing advocates primarily, I think, but I think they have a large intersectional crossover to people with low incomes as well. Have you connected with ACORN yet?
We haven't connected directly, although I think a couple of our members have, and I certainly have been promoting some of their materials, and the rent eviction people that are now at the Social Development Center, I've taken their cards to a couple of different places to try and help people to connect with them.
That's eviction prevention.
That's eviction
Yes.
prevention,
Right.
yes. And they are connected with ACORN.
Right. Do you find that there's still not enough interaction between people working against poverty and the rest of the community?
Yes. I find that people make assumptions. People who haven't experienced poverty don't always understand. One of the big things they used to say, and I think still do sometimes, is if they just budgeted better.
Yeah.
But when you realize somebody on OW is getting $373 a month for housing, and you can't even rent a room for $373, how do they budget that?
Yeah.
Maybe spend 2 nights in a room and the rest of the month on the streets.
Right.
Like it's not a matter of budgeting, it's a matter of not having enough resources.
Right. I think people who have just barely enough resources to scrape by are probably better budgeters than those who can frivolously discard some of the excess funds that they might happen to find.
Yeah, and the other thing is the judgment of how people spend their money.
Yeah.
I find it's horrendous that people will complain about somebody on ODSP buying a lottery ticket, and yet they have no trouble with somebody taking a bus from a senior's home to a casino.
Yeah.
They're using government money too because it's their pension.
Right.
Some of them have private pensions, but many of them are on the CPP pension, and like they spend one day at a casino in 3 months, and it's their entertainment, their enjoyment.
Yeah. It's their entertainment budget. I'm quite
Yeah.
sure that's budgeted for.
I'm sure it's budgeted. So if somebody on ODSP budgets a couple of dollars a week or a month to buy a lottery ticket, but it gets criticized.
Yeah. Is poverty particularly prevalent here in Kitchener or Waterloo?
It is slightly above what the national average is, but not a great deal. What we do have, though, is we have a lot of the groups that traditionally start in poverty. So we have a lot of immigrants and newcomers that are refugees. They usually come here and they start with poverty. Now, they often work their way out of it quite quickly, but having people like that coming in, and then the people who were working in factories where they were essentially untrained and now need to have training to be working, and having to go into minimum wage jobs.
Right.
I think we have a little more of that here than they do some other places.
Right. So Kitchener is particularly welcoming to
And
refugees and people with low incomes.
Which they should be. I mean, I think we have a wonderful community, and I think those people add greatly to the strength of our community and the enjoyment that all of us can have out of living in a multicultural society.
Yeah. So having a slightly higher than average level of people with low income in Kitchener and Waterloo, do you find that there is a greater polarization of wealth? Are there more than average rich people to offset that, or
I haven't actually looked at the numbers. It wouldn't surprise me, but I haven't actually looked at those numbers.
Okay. How about the perception then? You said that there's that judgmental attitude of a lot of people because there's more people in Kitchener with low income. Is that worse, or is it more accepting?
Well, I haven't lived anywhere else for a long time. I would guess it's probably worse, but I think some of what makes it worse is we're losing our middle class. And people who are afraid of moving into poverty are often afraid of people living in poverty. Because there's a fear of, like, I was judging them for living in poverty, and now I might be one of them. And what am I going to do? How can I equate that in my mind? I'm a good person. I try hard. I work hard, but I'm still falling behind. And I always thought that people living in poverty didn't work hard or didn't deserve the support they got. Now I need that support, and I realize everybody deserves it.
You find that there's a lot of working poor people who have jobs but still fall into a low income.
Yes, very
bracket.
much,
Yeah.
and particularly with part-time jobs and having to do 2 or 3 part-time jobs with no benefits.
Yeah. And precarious work at that. Even though you might
Yes,
have a part-time
oftentimes.
job today, it may not be there tomorrow.
And my experience working part-time was every single job wanted their job to be your priority. So you might work 10 hours at 4 different places to make up 40 hours a week, but each one of them wanted to be able to schedule you before the
Right.
other ones scheduled you. So you might lose one of those jobs because you couldn't fit them in.
I've heard of exclusion as well, where if you're working in one place, the job constraints are such that you're not supposed to work anywhere else.
Yes, that's another.
I'm not sure if that's legal.
Probably not unless you're working with the competition. But
And then it would just be a contractual thing, not
Yeah.
so much a labor market thing. So how do you find that the Civic Hub has helped ALIVE?
the Civic Hub has helped ALIVE, I think, by connecting with those other groups. The other thing is they provide us with expertise on things like applying for grants. Like, we would have never been able to apply for a grant. We had never had any experience with it. And through our first grant application, we had tremendous support, and our second one too, for that matter. And now managing that money and meeting the requirements for reporting back, they've been able to guide us with that. They've also provided a space for our like the stuff that we have created, the pamphlets, the promotional things we have done, provided us with a platform to promote our work, and just those connections and feeling that people care.
Yeah, so speaking of that platform to support your work, we've got an Awareness of Low-Income Voices page on the waterlooregion.org website, and that gives a little bit of information about the ALIVE group that's been, I guess, it says here from 2019 onwards, but I know that I've been at ALIVE meetings well before that. So ALIVE's been around for at least 15 years, I think.
Yeah, I think we started in 2006. I can't remember for sure. We have it somewhere in our documentation. And we started with another group, and then we before I joined ALIVE, they came under the umbrella of the Social Development Center. And that is probably around those dates that happened.
Right. What do you bring back to the Civic Hub?
Well, I hope we bring some education back to the Civic Hub. I hope we bring awareness that people are not alone in their struggles, whatever those struggles might be, and that the intersection between grassroots groups is probably bigger than a lot of people think.
Right. If there's people out there that haven't connected with any of the anti-poverty groups yet, how can they get a hold of ALIVE?
Through the Civic Hub. We meet the third Wednesday at 1 o'clock at the Social Development Center. That's 23 Water Street, and the entrance is off of Duke Street.
Right.
And we welcome anybody. This week we're going to have, as I mentioned, Doug from Community Gardens speaking. We've had other speakers, and sometimes we're talking about how we can present better and where we can find our own resources as well.
Right. That's open to anybody.
It's open to anybody.
Yeah.
Our membership is confined to people living with low income, but we also have They call them associate members. But we have people who can come. People can come no matter what their walk in life is and no matter what their connections are. We welcome people to come and join us.
Okay. Do you have an email address or something that people can get a hold of you?
We do. Ritika, do you remember what it is? I believe it's ALIVE.
alive@gmail.com, I think.
Okay. We'll have that in the show notes
Yeah.
at civichubwr.org. And we will dub in the proper email address for the podcast itself.
Thank you so much.
Cathie Stewart from ALIVE and Poverty Professors, thank you so much and welcome to the Civic Hub.
Thank you.
Radio Waterloo. The show is sponsored by the Social Development Center of Waterloo Region. The executive producer is Alexander Petrovich. Ritika Sharmali is the producer and host, and I'm Bob Jonkman. Civic Hub is supported by the Region of Waterloo Upstream Fund. The theme music is A Good Bass by Kumiko from the Free Music Archive and used under Creative Commons CC0 license.